Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Crossing the Line. We're here in CMU-TV studios for another fantastic week of sports. To the right of me, as always, Matt Entrican. And to the left of me, only here till we find a better replacement or we fire him, Josh Coleman. Guys, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Jerry. How about you?
It's been a fantastic week. I'm excited to talk more sports. A lot of stuff has happened, so it's going to be very interesting to talk about. Josh, how have you been?
I was doing pretty good until I found out that I am possibly on the chopping block. But outside of that, it's a pretty good Thursday. The Broncos are on right after this. Can't complain.
I don't know if that's something to be happy about, though, Josh. The Broncos.
It's the 1 week that I think we can actually win. Don't take this from me, Jay.
Oh, I'm going to take it from you. But before we get into that, let's dive into some NBA talk. Some of the big news coming in from the last few days. Doc Rivers and the LA Clippers have just parted ways after a heartbreaking Game 7 loss to the Denver Nuggets. Guys, big question here was this a smart idea by the Clippers to get rid of Doc Rivers, Matt?
No, absolutely not. It was not a smart idea. Okay, this decision was ultimately made by Steve Ballmer. And Steve Ballmer is a businessman, and he's not a basketball man. He's making this decision with a mind based on business. He's a man who demands results and demands results quick, okay? Listen, Steve Ballmer, he bought the franchise in 2013 and gave the team to Doc Rivers, someone who was supposed to revitalize the team and bring them to glory, something that they have never done before. And something you have in Doc Rivers is a guy who is a champion and an elite coach, okay? And, you know, remember the last time our Colorado team had a great coach and let him go after a disappointing playoff run? That was George Karl with the Nuggets. And what did the Nuggets do in the subsequent years? They fell into mediocrity and obsolescence, okay? And listen, this is a situation the Clippers were in that it was extraordinary, and you cannot let Doc Rivers shoulder all the blame. It is not his fault that the half of the team didn't even want to go into the bubble in the first place. It is not his fault that Kawhi Leonard only scored 14 points in Game 7 against the Nuggets, okay? And it is not his fault that they don't even have a true point guard and a guy who can be a true leader who can make people around him better.
That's fair. Josh?
I think the Clippers were right in this decision. Doc Rivers had 7 years to get to even the conference finals with 2 different sets of superstars. When he was first hired, he had Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan as his main 3 superstars and could not get to the conference finals, was 1 game away this year and didn't get close to that objective again until this year. This year they go to Game 7 against the Nuggets team who was not picked to even get close to winning the series. And he's got arguably one of the best players in the league on both ends of the floor, Kawhi Leonard. Paul George is a great defender. Struggled in the postseason, but like you said, you can't blame that on Doc Rivers. But franchises need a scapegoat, and that's Doc Rivers. When you can't produce for 7 years with really good lineups, it's going to end up in you getting fired. As sad as it is, I really like Doc Rivers as a coach, but he's never going to be what he once was with the Celtics. And that's just kind of the way it goes. You fall out of your prime. Athletes and coaches, they both fall out of their prime, and I think that's what happened. He was great with the Celtics, got to the Clippers and just could never get back there. And he had a big 3 like he did in Boston. And even early in that run, LeBron wasn't in the Western Conference. I think this was the right move for the Clippers, especially with 2 new superstars. Maybe all they need is a different coach, change some scenery up, new faces. I think this is going to be a good move for the Clippers in the long run, and I think it's going to help them in bringing free agents into LA.
Well, here's the biggest problem, though. Who is going to be that new coach, that new voice who's going to lead the Clippers to a place that Doc Rivers never could? I mean, I'm just thinking that you don't have better options than Doc Rivers.
I'll name you one, Greg Popovich.
You can't say that until he's actually in line to looking for a new job.
Why can't I? He's up in the coaching circle this year. He's obviously the best candidate for any team. Now, I think this decision is going to be made by Popovich, whether he wants to stay in the NBA or not. I think this is going to be a year he could possibly retire. But I think the Clippers have a chance to make a strong offer to possibly persuade Popovich from leaving the Spurs. Now, that's a tall order, but It's possible. It's possible. I'm not saying it's completely out of this realm of things that could happen. I don't think the coaching market isn't giant. Ty Lue is one of the leading front runners for that job right now, and he did pretty good with LeBron, and I think they're looking for a coach who's not going to step on anybody's toes, especially Kawhi Leonard's toes.
I don't know. I think all Doc Rivers needs to do is, limit the perspiration on his face, and maybe he'd have a little bit more energy to motivate these guys.
It's fair, but he's not hurting in this situation. Already got a new job, so.
Already has a new job, indeed.
He signed a 5-year deal with the Philadelphia Sixers, or 76ers, and I mean, looking at this too, I understand the firing just because this organization, or like you said, Josh, they've gone through 2 really talented groups of players, and especially for this season, they were built to not only beat the Lakers, but they were built to win a championship. You get guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and then you go up 3-1 in a series against the Nuggets, and you were set to win that series, but you just couldn't close it out. I understand where that's coming from. And under Doc Rivers, with Kawhi and Paul George, this team was destined for great things, but they just couldn't pull it off. But I think right now Doc Rivers is going to be in a good situation with the 76ers, so it's going to be interesting to see where this goes and who the Clippers decide they're going to pick up next. Moving on to the next topic here. Right now, guys, the NBA Finals have just kicked off. Game 1 was last night. The Lakers ran away with that Game 1 and never gave it up, and they take a 1-0 lead. But the biggest question here is that 1-0 lead really doesn't mean much at the moment. Can the Heat pull it out, and who's really going to win this series and hoist the Larry O'Brien Trophy at the end of the series? Josh?
This one does hurt me a little bit, especially because they did just beat my team in the conference finals. But I think the Lakers are going to take this one. They have a dramatic size advantage over the Heat with their 2 tallest players being Bam Adebayo and Cody Zeller. No. Dang it, forgot the name. It's okay. They only have 2 players above 6'10", I believe, and the Lakers have 3, Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee, and Anthony Davis, with LeBron being 6'9". He's right there. They don't have the size to keep up with this Lakers team. And then you look at the motivation that was given to the Lakers in February with the passing of Kobe Bryant. I figured that they were going to be in this moment in the NBA Finals. I didn't want it to come over the Nuggets, but I figured they'd be here because LeBron was really good friends with Kobe Bryant, and that only added motivation, especially with him wearing a Lakers jersey this year and them bringing out those Black Mamba jerseys in the postseason. I think it's extra motivation for LeBron, but the key for the Lakers is LeBron being assertive with his touches. When he plays a little bit more passively and lets the game come to him, that's when the Lakers are a little bit more vulnerable because he takes a facilitating role. If he's assertive with his touches, the assist numbers don't really drop that much because defenses have to either double him or just overload one side. So I think LeBron, if he's assertive with his touches, looking to attack the rim, settle for jumpers when they're there, put guys in the post, if he does all of those things, I don't think there's a way you can stop this Lakers team because then they have Anthony Davis who can shoot from the outside, handle the ball, play inside. And then you have the role players who haven't played great, but in Game 1 they showed up. They've shot the ball much better, and they need Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Danny Green to continue hitting those threes. KCP had 2 in Game 1, and Danny Green had 3. That needs to continue if they want to win this series, but with the Heat's injuries last night, with Goran Dragic going down with a torn plantar fascia in his left foot, Jimmy Butler rolling his left ankle, and Bam Adebayo straining his shoulder, those injuries I think are going to prove to be catastrophic for the Heat because Dragic was their second leading scorer for the team right behind Jimmy, and he had really been making strides in the playoffs to become that number 2 player right behind Jimmy.
Josh. Of course you're going to pick the Lakers. That's the easy pick. That's the natural pick. And, you know, I like that you brought up Kobe Bryant. I don't think if Kobe Bryant is with the Lakers in any way, shape, or form, I think Kobe Bryant is a wise enough basketball man to know that he shouldn't influence this series in any way, shape, or form, you know. So I don't think Kobe Bryant's going to be a factor, you know. He shouldn't be a factor. But anyway, I'm going to get to my main point, and you're right that the Lakers, they did play very well last night. But let me tell you something. They played a little bit too well. And too well in the sense that they did something last night that they're not going to be able to sustain. Did you guys know that when the bubble started, the Lakers were second to last in three-point shooting percentage? And so I'm telling you that there are 8 people on the Lakers who made a three-pointer last night. I don't think that's going to continue for the rest of the series, and definitely will not continue. Because LeBron makes 2/3 of his points from inside the paint. So you know LeBron's not going to be the one shooting three-pointers. And you know that the Lakers as a team are not going to be able to collectively shoot that well for the remainder of this series. And so what I'm saying is that if the Heat can find a way to lock down LeBron in the paint and limit those side players to do what they do all season long, and that's not going to be hard to do, the Heat do have a chance. Yes, they got cooled down a little bit. They sustained some injuries, minor injuries, and yes, they lost Game 1 by a substantial amount. But we always have Game 1 blowouts. It's so common. I'm not going to lose faith. I'm going to stick with my assertion that I made last week that the same person who gets served first at the bar is the same person that wins the playoffs, and that is who is hottest.
I'll give you that. The Heat are definitely shooting the ball much better than the Lakers coming into this series. But that needs to continue for 7 games if they want to do so, because the Heat aren't going to win in 5. They're not going to win in 6. If they want to win, it has to go to 7. And shooting, you just can't stay hot for 7 games in a row. You're going to have off nights. And I think that is where the Lakers capitalize, because Danny Green has not been playing that well. But in the finals, we saw it when he was with the Spurs. He becomes a different man in the finals. He becomes better at defense. He hits those corner threes. He knows his role, and he executes it almost perfectly. And last night was a big step for him. I think he gained some confidence going 3 for 8 from behind the line, or from behind the three-point line. That needs to continue. He needs to continue seeing that ball go through the rim, because he's going to be crucial to them winning this series. He's one of their best defenders and one of their best three-point shooters. I agree with you that the Heat can outshoot the Lakers. I don't think it's going to happen for an entire series, because as we saw last night, Duncan Robinson struggled. He's their main three-point shooter. Tyler Hero, he's a really good three-point shooter, but it's not where he necessarily dominates all the time. He can go inside, plays the mid-range pretty well. Duncan Robinson is a three-point shooter. You're not going to run him off, or you have to run him off that line, and the Lakers did that last night. If they keep that up, I don't think the Heat can outshoot them, because Duncan Robinson takes the majority and makes the majority of threes for the Heat.
Well, and coming into this series, I mean, I was thinking the Heat probably had one of the better chances of winning this. I said in 7 games. But now with those injuries to Goran Dragic and Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler, I mean, I've kind of looked at it, and I've thought I have a few situations that the Heat need to do in order to win this series. Obviously, the biggest one was staying healthy. And from what I've seen so far, those injuries, besides Dragic, they're going to be more game time decisions, or they're going to be questionable majority of the time. So if they could whoever is playing, they just need to stay healthy throughout the rest of the series, if at all possible. They need to change up their rotations, I think. If they do that, it would be beneficial to them, because then they can kind of account for those injuries. And then finally, they just need to not let LeBron and AD kind of destroy them on the pick and rolls. Last night, they kind of just let those pick and rolls happen, and they really didn't give much competition to those. But before we move on to this next topic, guys, from the sounds of it, I think we're looking at a pie bet.
I think you're right, Jerry. This calls for a pie bet.
Absolutely.
Josh, you're taking the Lakers in this one?
I'm taking the Lakers, sadly.
All right. I'm going to stick with my Heat. It's a pie bet.
It's a pie bet.
I was like, we can't
air shake.
Yeah, I was like, we can't really shake hands.
Okay, and
All right,
switching.
It's happening.
Switching and moving to the NFL. Looking at a couple teams here, I want to talk about one especially who could potentially shake up the AFC East with just how well they've been playing. The Buffalo Bills, they're coming into week 4, 3-0. They are leading that division for the first time in a long time. But the biggest question is is this Bills team for real, and are they Super Bowl contenders at this point? Matt?
No. The Bills are not Super Bowl contenders. Let's be real. You barely beat the Rams. As a matter of fact, you blew a Super Bowl 52 lead to the Rams and were down 4 with late in the fourth quarter. You beat the Jets by 10, and you barely beat the Dolphins. Okay, that's not exactly the kind of resume we look for in a future Super Bowl champion. Not to mention you have the Ravens and the Chiefs down the river, and of course the biggest devil of them all, the New England Patriots, who are standing in your way too. So maybe you are 4th in the AFC at best, and that's still saying you're lucky. And Josh Allen, his performance I don't think is sustainable at all. I mean, this is a guy who didn't even complete 60% of his passes all throughout college. He was 52% in his rookie year in the NFL, and he was 58% in his next year. And he's 71% right now, and I don't think there's any way in hell that he is keeping that up throughout the rest of this season. The Bills are what they've always have been. That's my take.
Wow.
That's fair. I think the Bills are contenders as of right now through 3 weeks. But they have a very, very tough stretch of their schedule coming up. And I think this is where we really get a sense of what this Bills team really is. Just in the next couple weeks, they play the Raiders, Titans, Chiefs, Jets, Patriots, Seahawks, and Cardinals before their Week 11 bye. Now, the only game that I can chalk off a win right now is the Jets for them. Just because, you know, they're the Jets. Well,
maybe.
It's the Jets. I'm giving it to the Bills right now. But Josh Allen has been playing better than we've ever seen him in the NFL. He's progressed a lot, and he is 2nd in the league in both passing yards, passing TDs, and completion percentage. Those are big things for him, and if he can keep that up, yes, this Bills team is a contender. I agree with you. I don't think Josh Allen can sustain this. We've never seen him have a 3-week stretch like this. And honestly, I don't think it's going to continue. It may continue next week or this week because they play the Raiders. The Raiders have been a little inconsistent on defense so far. I think the Bills will end up being contenders, especially for that AFC East championship and maybe the conference final Super Bowl, is because of the addition of Stephon Diggs. I think he does a lot for their receiving group and a lot for their offense. He leads them in receiving yards right now and receptions, but he adds a whole different kind of level to this offense.
You know what, Josh? This whole situation reminds me of a time about 9 years ago when the Broncos had a certain young quarterback who had certain questions about his ability to play the position, much like Josh Allen does. And he goes by the name of Tim Tebow, who actually went 5-0 to start off that season. Granted, he did have a legendary performance in that playoff game against the Steelers. I love that moment. But anyway, nevertheless, got to remember, you can start off strong. You don't always finish strong.
I think it's a little unjust to compare Josh Allen to Tim Tebow, one, because they were two very different styles of quarterback.
Tim Tebow was a national champion, a Heisman winner. Did Josh Allen do any of that?
That's where I was getting to, is Tim Tebow came into the league with a ton of high expectations. Josh Allen was a big question mark coming in. Tim Tebow, bust of the freaking year. I despise that man as a Bronco. He threw an 18-yard post route to win a playoff game, and somehow he's the hero of Denver. I'm so tired of hearing it.
No,
I really am.
That pass.
But Josh Allen right now, as I was saying, Stephon Diggs, his favorite target, and it adds a whole different level to their offense, which John Brown was never going to be. He's not a true number one because he's a downfield threat. Stephon Diggs takes that pressure off of John Brown so he can get the looks that he wants. He's not going to get doubled very often this year. And then in the slot, they have Cole Beasley, who is a very good slot receiver. He's going to get yards, and week 2 had, I believe, 6 receptions, 100 yards. That's going to be big because he provides an underneath threat, and all 3 of those wide receivers can pop off at any moment in time. That's why I think the Bills are contenders. And then you bring up their defense, which is one of the best in the league. It's hard to say that right now they can't somehow compete with the upper echelon of teams. I think the Chiefs beat them, but that's because the Chiefs are looking to get into a boat race and nobody's going to outscore them. I think the Bills defensively can take the AFC East and then push for the Super Bowl. The Ravens and Chiefs are still going to be tough for them, but I think they can compete with them.
Anybody can compete. I just don't know why you got to hate on Tim Tebow so much. He gave us some of the most exciting football. He gave us the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter were some of the most exciting football that we saw that whole year, man.
He gave me the worst anxiety I've ever had.
Come on, man. We got to hate.
You struck a nerve. I yell at everybody who brings that play up. It's one that sits very close to my heart because I feel like everybody overblows the play, and so that's why. I'm sorry I raised my voice, but it pisses me off.
But Josh, he gave us Tebowing. Like, yeah. Come on. Like,
it's a cultural phenomenon.
Definitely a cultural phenomenon. I'm gonna say this, and then we'll move on. So far this season, the Bills have offensively. They've put up over 1,000 yards of offense, and they're averaging about 450 yards per game, which is pretty amazing considering it's the Bills. And, I mean, I could see this team surprising some people, but they are still in the same division as this next team we're going to talk about, New England. This offseason, they've had a lot of changes. Tom Brady is no longer a Patriot. Cam Newton is now their starting quarterback. They're kind of sticking with the whole keep the MVP quarterback scenario for Bill Belichick, or evil mastermind Bill Belichick, as I like to call him. And, I mean, are the Patriots better off without Tom Brady? Josh?
This one is it's too early to call for me right now. We're 3 weeks into the NFL season, and Tom Brady, yes, had his struggles, new offense. Cam Newton had his struggles, new offense. It's week 3, they're both 2-1. They both have played one good team each, and then 2 lackluster teams. It's too early to call. Brady, yes, he's with the Bucs. He's thrown the ball better. The reason I think we're having this conversation is because Cam Newton brings a different dimension to this Patriots offense that we haven't seen for 20 years, which is the quarterback can run the ball. Tom Brady, not athletic, moves very well in the pocket, but cannot extend plays with his legs. Cam does. I feel like we're going to end up saying, no, the Patriots aren't better off with Brady. He's the greatest quarterback of all time. It feels unjust that we're even having this conversation for me. But Cam Newton played really well, so I understand why this is kind of a topic going around. But no, the Patriots aren't better off with Brady. He makes decisions better. He runs the 2 and 4 minute offenses better. Cam Newton just runs the ball better. That's it.
Well, of course they're better off without Tom Brady. Anyone with a reasonable football mind that's been watching the games this year can say that. I always say newer is better. Maybe broken is not always better, but Cam Newton, he looks great. Anyone can see that. He's taken this offseason. He's gotten himself back into good shape. He looks like he's doing well. I mean, he took that flip at the end of the Seahawks game, and he took that like a man, and he looks fine. And, back up just like that. And Tom Brady and the Bucs experiment, it seems to be going okay, but anybody can see that experiment is not going as well as things are going for the New England Patriots right now, who just went toe-to-toe with the Seattle Seahawks and could be an undefeated football team right now if Cam Newton had just ran an extra yard.
Okay, so yes, Cam Newton played pretty well, jumped back up, looking like his 2015 self. But are we really going to discount the fact that the Patriots have one of the best defenses in the league and that their defense, 1, helped them stay in that Seattle game? 2,
that's not the question.
No, but are the Patriots better off without Brady because the defense has been playing well and Cam Newton has gotten the job done? Or are the Patriots better without Brady because Cam Newton? Because I think this deals more with the defense than Cam Newton.
Yeah, but the Patriots can have the best defense in the world. It doesn't answer the question that are they better without Tom Brady? They would have the defense.
I already answered that question, though. I don't think they're better off. I think the defense has done just as much as Cam Newton has. He's run the ball effectively, but he has thrown the ball poorly. And his biggest weakness is accuracy. And so I trust Tom Brady more with the Patriots, and I think they're better off if they had kept Brady because he can throw the ball. He knows their offense, and he's a better down the stretch quarterback. He wins games more effectively in tight games. And if we look at things closely, Patriots probably going to be in some fairly close games this year because their offense doesn't have the weapons. So I trust Tom Brady more in that offense this year. And so I don't think they're better off without Tom Brady.
Coming into looking at this, I personally do think they are better off without Tom Brady, because right now Tom Brady is struggling with Tampa Bay. Granted, they're 2-1, but I mean, the biggest challenge they've had so far this season was against the Saints. I mean, last week they just went up against a broken Denver Broncos team, might I add, and they came away with a pretty decisive victory. At least towards the end, it got really decisive. But Tom Brady's really showing his age at this point. He's not able to move as much as he did, and he's struggling. His age is showing. And I think if the Patriots were to have kept Tom Brady, it would have hurt them down the stretch, especially come the playoffs time. And I feel like if they kept him, we would have had the same situation like we saw last season in the playoffs, where they lose where they go to a wild card and then they lose. At least right now with Cam Newton and with the way he's been playing, you have the possibility that, yeah, he's not the most accurate guy, but when you need to get a few yards down the stretch, Cam Newton, I think, is going to be that guy who could do that.
Cam Newton is so one-dimensional down there, though. Like in the Seahawks game, the Seahawks knew exactly what he was doing from that 2-yard line. They'd run that play several times already in the game. You know he's running the ball. With Tom Brady, you knew he was throwing the ball, but you didn't know who to. And with Bill Belichick, he can use routes and stuff against that defense. And yes, Bill Belichick's still the coach of the Patriots, but you can't do those same kind of things with Cam Newton that you can with Tom Brady. With Cam Newton, you're running the ball. If you need...
Exactly. You can do so much more, Josh.
You can run the ball, but in that Seattle game, he was showing his accuracy. He was hitting guys. Granted, Seattle does not have the best secondary, and I'll say that.
And
their biggest guy, or their main star defender, Jamal Adams, was probably one of the main reasons they were able to stop the Patriots as much as they did. But his accuracy was showing, but I think, like you said, Josh, it's still early, and we could have this argument, but before it's time for us to kind of wrap that up. Moving on to our shout-outs before the game, or before we end it here for Crossing the Line. Matt, who do you have this week for your shout-out?
Today, guys, I'm shouting out the Minnesota Twins for extending their consecutive playoff losses record to 19. The odds of that actually happening, losing 19 playoff games in a row, was calculated by StatCast, and it turns out it is something in the ballpark of 1 in 262,000. Those are the odds of that happening. Odds haven't been that low of something happening since Tim Tebow was the quarterback of the Denver Broncos, and the Vegas came out with the odds for them winning the Super Bowl. So
man,
that
just a lot of heat at Tim Tebow today.
That just seems right, though.
It does seem right. Josh, who's your shout-out?
My shout-out is Barack Obama, who showed up in the virtual stands of Game 1 last night. I was just happy to see him. One, he's surrounded by NBA superstars and legends, and then you're just going across trying to figure out who's who, and then you go, oh, wait, is that Barack Obama? And it kind of takes you a second to hit, and then you realize it. You're like, oh, crap, that really is Barack Obama. And it was just kind of a cool thing for me to see, especially because I don't know why, but I just thought that being a former president, he was not going to be here. Like, he had more important things to do. Is that bad to say?
But what's he going to do with his time? He's not president.
I don't know. It just feels like there's something bigger that he could put his time to, but he's basically in retirement, like you said. So it just threw me for a loop.
It took you a second.
Yep.
And for my shout out, it's going to go to South Park for convincing the Denver Broncos to put all their characters in the stands as cutouts. But I also just want to say their pandemic special they had last night was fantastic.
Oh, I missed it.
It was so great, Josh. You should go back and watch it. But that's going to do it for us here in the studio. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Crossing the Line. We hope you all have a fantastic week, and we shall see you all next time.